Members of the public. My name is Megan Ryan, and I will be the chairperson for tonight's Manila Community Services District regular Board of Directors meeting, Tuesday, November 15th, 2022, and we'll call the meeting to order at 6:33 p.m. This meeting is being held virtually via Zoom, as noted on the agenda. You can participate through a computer or phone as stated. Unless otherwise noted, all items on the agenda are subject to action by the Board of Directors. And we do not have any time-specific items this evening. So we'll start with roll call to determine quorum. So please state your name and present for the record.
Dave Janetta, present.
John Broderick, present.
Thank you. And I think Sequoia may have spoke at the same time Dave did, but I think I heard it. Thank you very much. 4 of 5 of the directors are here, so we do have a quorum to proceed. Item number 2 is AB 361. This is resolution 22-05 regarding continuation of teleconference meetings. This would allow for remote meetings to continue in this fashion, effective today through December 15th, 2022. We are looking for a discussion or motion on the resolution.
I motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second that motion.
All right, great. Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you very much. Next, to approve the agenda, the item is approve agenda. So here I'll ask if there are any agenda modifications. Seeing none, and I think we'll have a note from Chris regarding the agenda or the staff packet at this time.
Yeah, thank you. You might notice in the packet, I normally put a summary with the suggested motion and the action that we're seeking, and I didn't have any of those included in this packet. So at any time during this meeting, as we go through these items, I'll jump in and kind of help guide the board and what we're trying to accomplish with each one of these items tonight. So I apologize for that. I was kind of under the gun on Saturday getting these done, and it didn't make the deadline for that. So if you missed that, I'll make sure that they are in all future packets.
Great, thank you very much for the update. Appreciate that. Moving on to item number 4, public input, petitions, and announcements. The public is invited to present petitions, make announcements, or provide other information to the board on matters that are not on the agenda. The board will impose a time limit of 3 minutes for individuals for items not comments for items not on the agenda. By law, we cannot take action on these items, so it is a public comment period, again, for items not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to make comments on items not on the agenda? So please raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period for items not on the agenda. Moving on to item number 5, proclamation of appreciation for Dave Janetta's service on the board. And we'll go to Chris for staff report.
Proclaimed. I told Dave I was going to bake him cookies. I couldn't fit those in the packets either. So I'll be delivering those to Samoa. I'll have my wife make some keto cookies because those are hip, I suppose. And Dave, I want to say personally from staff perspective, you've been a great member and I'm going to miss you a lot. And this is your last meeting. I'm sure maybe we'll connect down south of the bridges soon enough.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it. And just would like to say that I've had a really great time on the board and I've learned a lot. And I mean, my sort of impetus for joining was really Chris just being like, hey, there's an election and, you know, nobody's running. What do you think? And I just moved into Manila and it sounded like a great way to get involved in something and kind of see how the community functions on, a level that I might not otherwise get to see. And felt like I was just kind of starting to figure out how to really participate and help with things. But, unfortunately had to move to Samoa. So, but hopefully there'll be opportunities to work together in the future. And it's been great meeting everybody and continuing to see people. Obviously, we're, a stone's throw away. So it's been great to still see people like Brett out, surfing, and I see Sequoia while I'm running. And it's also been great to see all the community members come to these meetings, including some more outspoken members that don't appear to be here tonight. So it was all fun and enlightening, and so hopefully I'll have a chance to work with you all again soon. So thank you for being so cool. So, and I know I left off John and Meg, but I haven't seen you two surfing or running. So but hopefully at some point soon. And thank you for helping me, and and just being great people to work with. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you, Dave. Definitely appreciate your service on the board and having the opportunity to work with you over the past just under 2 years, I think.
I was
Time
just gonna
flies.
throw in there, Dave, I know you do video stuff and music related things, and I wanted to give you an invite. I have a little home recording studio and I do video production also. So if you ever want to come over and plunk around on some of that type of stuff, definitely reach out.
Cool, absolutely. Now we don't have to worry about the Browns rules or whatever they are.
Brown Act, yes.
Brown Act, that's what I was searching for.
Awesome. It's been great working with you, Dave. I'm sure we'll cross paths in the future.
Well, thank you again. If there are no further comments on this item, we'll open it for public comment. If there's anyone here, members of the public who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. And yes, thank you again, Dave. You will be missed. I will ask Chris to perhaps bring back, I think Dave was fulfilling the role as secretary. And so although I believe that at the beginning of January, we'll look at our officers again with fresh eyes. But if there's a need there in December, perhaps let us know next month. And I'm sure anyone can jump in and help with what that might entail.
Yes, thank you for the reminder on that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar are typically routine items that are routine in nature for the district. I will read each of the items off. If there are any board members or members of the public that would like to speak to the items on the consent calendar, those can be pulled to a separate public hearing. If there is no board member or member of the public that would like to pull the item off the consent calendar, the items will remain and the items can be then voted on in one action, essentially. So with that said, item 6A, draft minutes of September 20th, 2022. With a note, October meeting was canceled. Is there anyone that would like to discuss the meeting minutes of September 20th, 2022? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, item 6A will remain on consent. Item 6B, received disbursements for October 3rd through November 4th, 2022. Are there any board members or members of the public that would like to have this item pulled to a full public hearing? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, item 6B will remain on the consent calendar. So I'll be looking for a motion from the board to approve the consent calendar.
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you very much. We're going to get, now we're on item 7 on the agenda, business items. There are 2 items here that are action items. Number 7A, resolution 22.06, authorizing the Manila Community Service District as a subcontractor for the Harbor District Clean California Grant on the Manila Park. And we'll go to Chris for a staff report.
Thank you very much. I want to be real clear up front. These A and B are 2 totally separate items, covering 2 completely different projects. But basically what this resolution says is the Harbor District will pay our agency for any work related to the Clean California Grant as it pertains to the park. And for the most part, that's going to be development of drawings, design work, and any permitting environmental work required for our parking lot for the most part. I left it a little bit generic to capture some other amenities like maybe some trash cans and things like that. But for the most part, the Harbor District would have had to do a little bit more gymnastics, engineering wise and design wise, to bring somebody on board. And Caltrans told them that it's okay that we do that work and they would just pay us through the same funding. So in order to protect the district and protect staff, I wrote this resolution to authorize that in case anybody had any questions from the Harbor District, if we had the authority to bill them. And so that's what this says, that our board is aware of this and authorizes us sending invoices to the Harbor District as related to the park. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to jump in and see if I can answer them.
Sequoia.
Do we have the manpower to carry out this work? If I'm understanding it correctly, that could be an issue. Or are we gonna have to hire people? Or
Yeah, well, this is essentially, this resolution is authorizing us to pay GHD to do some really minor design work just on the parking lot and then go out. We're not going to actually do the paving of it. Did
okay,
you say?
I was
Okay.
misunderstanding there. That's good. So Brett will be doing the work.
Yeah, and I mean, I can give you a little general overview if that's appropriate and wanted. So the Harbor District and RCAA applied for the Clean California Grant, which includes several improvements all throughout the peninsula. Some components of that larger grant were in Manila, largely based off of kind of RCAA's outreach and visioning for the park, and then those kind of general master plan concepts, for lack of a better term, that were developed. One of those being the parking lot. And so what we're looking to do for the parking lot, so it's a fixed fee that's in the grant. There are design, construction management, and then construction implementation dollars. What we're looking to do is remove the spur track, a railroad track that goes right through the middle of the parking lot, as a part of kind of Manila's work. We have some cultural resources investigations going on to make sure that we're good there. We've confirmed with the county that would not require a CDP so long as it's within the footprint of the existing parking lot. So we'll take out the railroad ties and the tracks, put aggregate base back in there, compact it, bring it up to grade, then grind the parking lot, so take off a layer of the parking lot and then repave it. That would also, what GHD would do would be do a simple design, specifications, details, so that and then we would help the district put that out to bid, and a licensed engineering contractor would bid on that work to complete it. And then, as Chris kind of indicated, there are also like some bear-proof trash canisters and some signage and some of those things. And we could have a landscape architect kind of just had do a typical detail and put those in. But the parking lot is kind of the bigger ticket item or focus of that.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. And this item simply authorizes us to pay for that work in advance and then get reimbursed through the Harbor District.
So the accounting and record keeping would be your responsibility?
That's correct.
Thanks. Are there any additional questions for Chris or Brett from board members? Seeing none, I'll open it for public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this item? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will close the public comment and bring it back to the board for deliberation or a motion.
So I'll motion that we approve resolution 2022.06.
I'll second that.
Great, thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, and looking forward to those improvements. Next on the agenda is the consideration of scope of services from GHD implementing water project. State Water Board Agreement number D2202001. Go to Chris for a staff report.
Yeah, we didn't meet in October, so I didn't have a chance to congratulate everybody and thank us for getting a $3.5 million construction grant for a new water tank, some distribution upgrades, repair on a line that crosses Highway 255, treatment facilities, tremendous amount of work that we've been waiting for a new water tank at least since for many years. It's reached its useful life. It's not seismically kosher any longer. It's beautiful, but we're going to get a new one. And now we've got the money to do it. And we waited a little while after we knew we were going to get approval in order to avoid a 10% match. That was going to be a $350,000 loan. So we were able to avoid that. And now the paperwork is actually in my car right now to submit to the state from our attorney that gets us rolling with that. And with that said, GHD got in front of this project with the attached that's in the packet, a scope of work and with a fee schedule in it to implement this final phase of it, which is construction and wrapping up all the loose ends. And I'll stop there and let board members and through the chair if they have any questions for Brett, who's with us tonight.
Great, thank you. Do any members of the board have questions for Brett on this item?
So we're going to be replacing quite a bit of stuff. Is there going to be a lot of disruptions to people's services or things like that over the coming years? I'm assuming this will be a couple of years that this will be happening, or?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'll jump in and supplement. So I think what we're targeting, getting a jump on this, we're thinking that we can implement this, put it out to bid maybe in the late spring of 2023. I think construction will probably it'll take several months, but it'll be in 2023. So I mean, I think we're looking to wrap it up by the end of 2023. As for disruption, so in general, the locations, kind of throughout the community where we're replacing valves. So those are in valve boxes, existing valve boxes, very little disturbance to switch those out. Where we're doing a new, there's an existing pipe that goes under 255 through a culvert right now that is not, the way that you typically would do it. So we'll directionally drill that. That's over at like Carlson Road. So there'll be a little bit of disruption to traffic, and then a little bit over there to the Carlsons on the other side of the highway there. But we'll kind of sequence that. We'll maintain access during construction, but there will be some planned shutoffs associated with it as we tie in. And then the bulk of the work is kind of in Loop and Drive. And then at the district's facilities. So at the district's existing facilities, I wouldn't, intermittent disruptions. It'll be for maybe a few hours at a time. Sometimes these things are sequenced in the middle of the night to avoid disruptions to the community. But so minor disruptions. Construction will probably last, several months.
Yeah, and a big part of our resilience a few years ago, the board approved of us replacing that valve in the street, and that bought us a tremendous amount of time and a workaround so that the tank and all of that construction can be done while we're still hot and online with Humboldt Bay. So I see total minimal disruptions, really, if any, until maybe a middle of the night switch over into the new system from Lupin. So, yeah.
But there will be excavators around and, construction equipment and that sort of thing. And yeah, myself and my colleagues will be out and around and chatting with all of our community members.
Any additional questions for Brett on this item? I did have a couple of questions. One would be how I think February of 2022, we reviewed and I believe approved a scope of services for GHD over $600,000. And I'm curious, is this the same or different? I mean, to me, it's likely different, but
Yeah.
I just had to think about that.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah, sure.
You could tell us the difference.
Yeah, so both having to do with water. The one in February was for the flood reduction and drainage enhancement. So all of the open channel drainage improvements. That grant was through the California Natural Resources Agency. And so, yeah, so that's what that was for. We kind of typically how we approach these projects is we kind of do the grant applications and that sort of thing under the on-call contract pro bono. And then if the grant is successful, then, under the on-call contract, we complete the follow-on work. So that project was California Natural Resources Agency and for drainage improvements. So we're at about 30% design. We're starting CEQA on that project. That includes kind of removing some of the clearing out like the debris jams in the existing drainage channels, replacing culverts, that sort of stuff. Doing a rain garden over at the community center, removing a lot of that concrete that's there. But yeah, so that's kind of a drainage improvement project. This project started back in, I think, 2017. It is funded through the water board, and in particular the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. We did a planning study back in 2018, which basically took care of the preliminary engineering report. So looking at the system, what are the needs, developing alternatives, and then going to 95% construction plans and specifications. So almost up to ready to construction, as well as all of the permits. So we got most of the permits and application packages. So, and that is focused on drinking water infrastructure. And so where we are with that project, so we kind of applied for construction funding back in, I think it was 2018. And then as Chris mentioned, it wasn't really eligible for a while. Then it was eligible with a 10% match. Then the state got more funding, and then they decided to fund the entirety of the project. And so we have 95% plans and specifications. We need to address some comments we received from the Division of Drinking Water, and then pull together a bid package. We'll put it out to bid, and then we have the application packages pretty much ready for the Caltrans encroachment permit and the county encroachment permit. Those we typically kind of put on to the contractor. We provide them all of the information, and then the contractor actually applies for those and pays the fees. And then we'll get approval, from the water board to move forward with the construction.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that was one of my questions. It sounds, what I'm hearing you say is that the encroachment permits have not been applied yet. So talking about the task and the scope regarding, hey, we're going to review what's out there and give you an update. Sounds like there's no update on that to be given.
Yeah, unless we find something, kind of out of the norm. But we completed CEQA. We did a mitigated negative declaration and filed for that, and then we got the coastal development permit. We don't have any work that's within any wetlands or anything, so we don't have to get that suite of permits. And so it's just the encroachment permits.
So so a part of the task to review the permitting, that would include working with the county planning to ensure that the coastal development permit is still effective and has not expired. Should the permit have expired, would GHD, in the cost of the $16,000, should the permit expire, does that include an application assistance meeting with the county to outline what's exactly needed to resubmit for the permit?
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
be
I mean, we
making that
can.
request.
Yeah, sure.
That
Yeah,
be included in that price.
yeah, if that CDP has expired, then I think that we would come back and ask for a no cost amendment to move some dollars around within our existing contract to make sure that that gets paid for. The goal of this project, yeah, is that, you know, it is 100% grant funded and that nothing's coming out of, you know, Manila's water or general fund to pay for it. So, you know, the dollars are there, so make it
So
happen.
yeah, thank you, and good point, because I think, yeah, where we can, should application assistance meeting be needed, an additional application or processing for that CDP. You know, I'm just gonna put good energy in the universe that it's not needed, but you know, I'd be really interested to know the answer to that question from the county, and want to, if should the a new CDP be required, or an extension of the current CDP, that we're clear on that and that that's included with this estimate.
Yeah, and I will follow up on that tomorrow with our environmental folks so that we can just kind of get some
Mhm,
clarification on that.
mhm. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Okay, my apologies again for the summary not having a recommended motion in that, but we are
Well,
looking
I
for.
think, well, I was gonna go to the public comment. If there are no additional questions by board members, I'd like to open this item up for public comment. Is there any members of the public here that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment, and yes, bring it back to the board for deliberation or a motion on the scope of services.
I'll make a motion to approve the scope of work. I suppose that's the appropriate way to phrase it.
Yeah, I would, if the motion maker is, thinks that this is appropriate, with the amendments to the scope of work that describe, the processing of a new or an extension of the CDP, and just how that would work with the funds. That's a clear enough direction. But if you're
Yes, what
open
you
to
said.
adding that to your motion, that would
Yes,
be great.
please.
I appreciate
Yes.
it. Thank you.
I'd like to make that motion with the addition that May suggested.
I'll second that.
Great, thanks. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye. All those opposed say no. Thank you. Motion carries 4-0. Next on the agenda, which is agenda item number 8, this section of the meeting is board initiated items. These are items for consideration by the board, initiated by a board member. There are 2 this evening. One is, so first we'll start with a consideration of board letters supporting an extension of pending evictions at Stamps Lane. And so we'll go to Chris to kick this off.
Thank you. Yes, the packet doesn't have a draft letter in it, and I have it available if I can throw it up as needed, or Sequoia can read it. This was brought up when the draft agenda went out to the members, that Sequoia had asked that we consider a letter from the board of directors to address the evictions over on 150 Stamps Lane, and I'll let Sequoia elaborate on it.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so I just kind of, it wasn't very well covered. Like there's nothing in Lost Coast Outpost, but I saw an article in Redheaded Black Belt about the eviction going on there, and it's quite complicated. But as far as anyone can tell, the property owner, or the woman who was receiving the mail that was living there and collecting rent from the tenants, which was an unpermitted RV park, she didn't notify at least anyone, or definitely didn't notify everyone that the place was being foreclosed on and they were all going to be getting evicted. And so it seems that most of the residents there, and there were like 20 or 30 people living there, found out like, a week before they were going to be forcibly removed by the sheriff. And so that was kind of obviously just not right in a lot of different ways. And they managed to get some sort of an extension, but it's very unclear what that is. And I've been over there speaking with some of the residents and whatnot. And I also spoke with Linda, who was the woman who was not passing along the information appropriately. And yeah, it's just, there's not a lot of clarity, and these are a lot of people have been living there for up to 10 years. Like some people have been there for 5 years. Some of the people I talked to have been there for like 10 years. So they've established residence there for quite a while. And I thought it would be in the best interest of the district to give people as much time as possible, because one of the people I spoke with over there that was staying over there was actually the woman that Chris and I had asked to move out of the encampment that Jennifer Savage, I believe, was the person who was complaining about the encampment being close to her trail. So we had gone and, spoke with her, and she was very, like not confrontational at all, and like complied pretty much immediately. Said, okay, I'll move. But she was someone that had been complained about for living in the dunes, and she's staying over there at that place. And so I think she's probably not the only person. There were actually other people that I spoke with there that said that they had also lived out in the dunes prior to living there. So I think in the district's interest, those people having some time to hopefully find a place to live is going to prevent people from moving out and creating dune encampments. And also, I just think that, it's the right, like people deserve 60-day notice to find a place, I feel like. So I spoke with Mike Wilson, and he directed me to Joe Mattioli, who is with Cutton Realty and responsible for the property. And Joe said, well, first I called the sheriff, and the sheriff said, we don't really know what's going on. We're waiting to hear from the bank. And I called Joe, and he said, well, we're kind of working it out, and maybe 30 days, but there was something vague. So the letter I wrote, I can read through it quickly. It's pretty short, but basically I think it wouldn't be bad to ask for 60 days total for the residents from the time that they found out, which was like a week prior to the initial, or actually I think I say 60 days from when the initial eviction was supposed to take place. So that would be like 60 days from a week ago is what, and so it's something that could be revised and whatnot, but I do think it would be, a good thing. I'll read through it really quickly and then answer any questions. And Chris might have additional information, or someone else might have other perspectives. But to whom it may concern, due to the overwhelming shortage of affordable housing options in Humboldt County and the strict rules and regulations regarding trailer age and condition required by local RV parks, the Manila Community Services District Board of Directors would like to voice our support for a granting of a 60-day extension from when the original eviction was scheduled to take place before any evictions of the residents living at 150 Stamps Lane are carried out. There is a high likelihood that some of the current residents of the RV park will end up in illegal encampments on the MCSD's property if they are not given sufficient time to find alternative housing options. Such encampments often lead to environmental damage, and they pose a fire hazard. Many Manila residents have also recently complained about such encampments. We believe it is unrealistic to find housing in the period of time that has currently been allotted, and it is unethical to evict people onto the streets without giving them proper amount of warning, especially this time of year. Thank you for your consideration regarding this matter. Sincerely, the Manila Community Services District Board of Directors. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or concerns with this proposal.
I like the letter. I'm wondering what we as the service district can do. Are those in so much as like those people are obviously paying for water and sewage currently? Do we know whether they're caught up, and is that something where we can offer to waive those costs for that time period to help them out financially to find a better situation?
I'll answer that part of it. The house is caught up. There's not a enormous balance, and we did notice there was a lot of water usage there, but it wasn't significant. But there's not 12 or 30 different connections there or 30 different accounts. It's one account for that address. So we didn't really charge them, and they weren't using the sewer just to cover staff. Our basis on that, we'd been out there and looked at the septic tank, and we've only serviced one connection there. So everything else was outside of the district's utility.
Okay. So I'm hearing that would help the person that may have helped cause the problem and not the people who are experiencing the issue.
In that sense, yes, and that person is caught up.
Okay.
As far as being able to talk about personal water bills and stuff, there's not a big issue with that. Yeah, there might be some foreclosure.
The water won't be shut off to that property anytime in the next 60 days, basically.
Generally speaking, we often get requests from landlords to terminate water service as a tool to evict, not at this place. And we refuse to do so. If whoever's in the house can pay the water bill, it's not up to the district to make that determination. And we wouldn't want to be used as tools in that sense. And it's not fair to not deny those services to anybody in that regard. This place hasn't done that. And we haven't had a request from the bank or the new owner to terminate service there yet, but we will be terminating service if it gets into the arrears past our normal threshold.
I guess my next question would also be, who would this letter go to? The sheriff, the county, board of supervisors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was trying to figure that out, and that's why I talked to Mike Wilson. I talked to the sheriff's office, and I talked to Mike Wilson, and Mike directed me to Joe Mattioli, who's the real estate agent, and he said that he could definitely get it to the right people. I think Joe is a big decision maker and didn't want to really admit how fully he was in charge of all this stuff, was kind of the impression I got. That's just, I don't want to say that like as a fact, but that's just kind of the impression I got. But he definitely said if we send him the letter, he'll make sure that it's seen by the people that are in charge of determining this, because it's basically they're trying to get this property cleared out so they can sell it. And so there's not a buyer right now. It's not listed right now. And so it really makes not a significant difference to them whether, that the impression I got is it doesn't make a huge difference to them. I think that when I first started speaking with him, he kind of thought maybe I was coming from an angle of like, we want to get these people out of here. And so he was like, yeah, hopefully in the next 30 days, we'll do another eviction. And then when I told him my perspective and what it seemed like in the interest of the district, he said, that sounds very reasonable. So I think that there's like, I don't think that there's a big pushback on this, but it would just be like giving our suggestion based on our interests. Yeah.
I just have a quick follow-up. I mean, definitely in support of this. But just to kind of play devil's advocate, is there any reason, have there been complaints? Are there anything anything? Is there any reason we should feel like anybody here is kind of a danger that we do want out? Is there any way this could come back on us in a negative way if we kind of support this? And then, anything to be worried about in terms of, just want to make sure we're covering our bases.
I can give my thought on that, and then Chris could probably give more if he knows of any complaints or anything. But as far as I understand, everyone I spoke with there, which was about half a dozen people, were very like friendly, and like it was a very like welcoming. The vibe was good there, but obviously a lot of it's people that can't really get into regular trailer parks and whatnot, and low income, and there's definitely trash, and there's been concerns mentioned about, the Linda, the woman who is the woman who was foreclosed on. She said that the people that are moving right now are leaving trash behind, and she said that people weren't paying rent for a period, or a lot of people weren't paying rent, and that's why the whole thing was. So there's like, it's not like a squeaky clean like situation, but as far as I understand, there's not any reason that giving people more time would cause any more waste or other issues. Of course, like they were getting their septic tanks pumped, and I don't know how that's arranged, and if they'll still be able to. I mean, I don't know those details. So maybe Chris can speak to what his thoughts are on that matter.
I've heard the same thing, I think, if you don't mind me jumping in. Then as far as septic tanks being pumped, I heard what everybody else heard, that there's a private hauler, and I haven't contacted that same hauler. We also use a couple of private haulers. But we didn't notice anything odd with the septic tank. So our interest in that property from the district's point was non-existent, really. I did hear a complaint a few years ago from Friends of the Dunes that there's a lot of campers over there. But legally, as far as the board goes, politically and legally, you can make ceremonial proclamations, and you can support issues that any issue you want. When I first started, the board was against the war in Iraq. So it really comes down, I think, to who are you up against. If the board wants to write a letter, the new property owner, if this was somebody who already owned the property that was going to be a ratepayer, I'd caution the board, because we would be alienating that private property owner and working against their efforts. But you're talking about a bank, so I don't have any thoughts on that one way or the other from staff's perspective. So it's not necessarily an inappropriate action to take. I think it's supporting some people who have lived in Manila for quite a while. So that's my amateur legal opinion on it. I don't think that there's any backlash issues that we would be concerned about at this time.
Thank you, Chris. Has there been any contact or correspondence with the county Humboldt Code Enforcement Unit and their efforts or non-efforts at this location?
When I spoke with the sheriff's department, they said that they were just waiting to hear from the bank on what the bank wanted them to do. Basically, they said it wasn't under their like, basically the bank is going to make the determination of when they want to pursue another active eviction process, was what the sheriff department told me. So I think the sheriff department doesn't want to have anything to do with any like responsibility aside from just being told what they need to do and them going and doing it. That's the impression I get, because it's obviously, and I will say that even with this, extension, I don't foresee this being it's going to be kind of an ugly thing no matter what, I think. But I think that if we give 60 days notice, then it at least can look somewhat reasonable in the eyes of the public, of like, hey, we made certain that everyone there had 60 days notice. And then if it gets ugly, it's a lot better than if they went in like they were going to a week ago, when people had less than a week, and if they forcibly started removing people's property and trying to force them out of their homes onto the streets. I mean, that's just horrible. So but I definitely know how things go, where 60 days can come and go, and this could become an issue for the district after that. I don't know exactly how, but but I just feel like it's almost like covering people's tracks more so to give people more time. I'm surprised that the bank would not want to. I mean, they might already be totally leaning in this direction, but you would think they would really want to make sure they're covering their tracks, because there's a lot of laws protecting people who have established residence at a location for a duration of time. Like they would have to. So stop rambling.
Thank you, Sequoia. Are there any additional questions for Chris or Sequoia at this time by board members? Seeing none, I'm going to open it for public comment. If there are any members of the public here who would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will close the public comment and bring back to the board for deliberation on this item. Or a motion. And I do have comments and want to have a further discussion, but thought it was more appropriate to the deliberation. But if anyone else has anything additional, please feel free to jump in.
The last thing I was curious about is, if this was approved, how the letter would be signed. I'm not sure if it would just say the Manila Community Services District Board, or if it would say these members of the board, because I know like Danielle's not here and whatnot. So I just don't, that's one consideration, but maybe we could touch on that depending on if it's something people are interested or not.
Briefly, the sign by the board of directors, if this was a 3-to-1 vote tonight, it would still be the board of directors because you act as a body. So Danielle being absent, unless you specifically wanted to be excluded in absent, I believe it would be appropriate.
Yeah, I agree with that. Whichever way we go is action by the whole of the board. I'll start off by saying I'm certainly sympathetic to both sides of the coin here, and it is, I think, we've seen in managing our own properties that it's difficult to have to evict people from our property, but that are impacting other landowners. A part of what I struggle with is that it is a private property matter that does not impact the district. However, it may also have, there are also neighbors to this property who are tax-paying people that they may consider this a nuisance and may be affecting their quality of life. We don't know, and nobody here came here to speak on that. But to take a side one way or the other, my choice is to remain neutral, and where it doesn't affect the district, to stay out of private property matters, essentially. I do think there is the potential, it's unknown, however, if people are evicted, where do they go? Do they end up on our property? But I'm also a little uncomfortable with saying keep them on your private property, because we don't, then they won't, there may be a less impact to ours, and so that feels a little NIMBY to me. And whatever that happens, it is what we'll have to move forward as a property owner of our own properties to deal with it accordingly, depending on what the outcome of the potential evictions are. I also read the red-headed black belt article. That's all that I could seem to find. The way that I understand it was from the article is that the evictions were slated for August 29th, where the property owner asked for a 30-day extension and was granted a 60-day extension. That it wasn't clear to me in the article why the sheriff was there earlier this month, but should that be true, you think that would have extended through November. So I think that goes to speak to just a lot of like unknown details in this situation. Like you were referring to, the sheriff's not really sure, no one's taking responsibility for it, that it's private property, not really a part of the public record. So it's hard for us to, I think it's hard for me to stand behind something that is really a lot of unknowns in that process. Also from the article, from what I read, is that the eviction date is undetermined at this time. And so that they had came previously earlier in the month and the protesters were there. They seem to have backed off on that earlier 10 days ago, I think, or, it was the 2nd or the 5th, the earlier in this month, ultimately didn't evict that day. And then the article says the date hasn't been undetermined or hasn't been determined. And whether that's to their knowledge or facts or not, again, we don't know. And so asking for a 60-day extension from an unknown date is also, I'd like to have the facts. If we were saying 60 days from this date, that's more clear to me, but it seems that the actual date for the eviction has once been extended by 60 days and now is again unknown. And so to base our 60-day request off of question mark is hard. I would appreciate more facts there, I suppose. In regard to the county code enforcement, and process too, I think is important to understand in context of like the bank, the sheriff, the eviction, and the property owners not paying your mortgage payments versus the county code enforcement that's really looking at land uses. And should, even with a conditional use permit, could an RV park be there? And so with the sheriff having this track with the, I'm curious on the what the county code enforcement, which is separate from the sheriff, what they would say regarding the land use activities. Because based on some of the information that you shared, Sequoia, just regarding the trash, and also there's, like Chris shared, there's no connections, and it's a environmental health concern, and the additional permitting may be needed there. So I'm unclear how the county code enforcement is involved, and if that's really, if that it would even be a long-term solution to this problem, or issue that people are having. So with that all said, I would be more comfortable with directing, if the board would want to direct staff to gather some more facts and bring this back, as opposed to signing off on a letter tonight. But that's my 2 cents on that.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, just to kind of maybe touch on some of those points you made. The 60 days, and it could be clarified, would be the 60 days from the Wednesday that they were supposed to be when the sheriff showed up to perform the eviction that was cited in the article. So it would be 60 days from, I believe, last Wednesday. So that would be the actual exact time we were asking for. In terms of private property owner, like imposing on a property owner's rights, I would be more inclined to share that perspective if there was a property owner living there, or a property owner that wasn't a real estate agency that just wants to list the property for sale. There's no one that's actually affected currently. I mean, there's the opportunity cost of someone who maybe would have been able to purchase that property a month earlier, which I understand, but it doesn't sound like they have anyone actively purchasing it from what I understood, because I actually inquired about potentially purchasing it, not personally, but through an organization, but that's another story. The other thing of, effects on other residents, I feel like if this park's existed for 10 years, and Chris said the only complaints he's had are from Friends of the Dunes, and sounds like that's, another one of the complaints Friends of the Dunes has had is people camping on their property. So, I don't know that giving people additional time is going to prevent them from camping in the dunes, which I think is the number one thing that is in the Manila Community Services District's interest. But it certainly seemingly would be the best way to avoid that, in my opinion. I can't think of a better way to hopefully avoid more homeless people. And ultimately, you know, like Chris said, these are our neighbors, our other Manila residents that have lived here for a long time, a lot of them for a long time. So although the RV park was unpermitted, that's the fault of the woman that was running the operation, who illegally was collecting rent from these people for months, for quite a period of time. She was she had gotten the notice of the foreclosure, and she was no longer legally the owner of that property. She was still collecting rent from these people. So she was actually committing some illegal activity, is what, you know, that's what, I can't say that definitively because I'm sure there's a lot of, you know, but that's what it seems to be is happening. So ultimately, to me, they are our constituents. They're people that live in Manila. It's not their fault that the park wasn't maintained in a legal way or carried out in a legal way. And so I think it very much is in the interest of the district to do what's right for those people, and also what's going to give us the best bet of avoiding more dune encampments.
I'd also like to just put out there that, you know, it's not, what we're saying isn't binding in any way to anybody really. So putting a date of 60 days is simply a suggestion, and they can pick the 60 days they choose, or they can ignore it all. You know, the bank may just shrug and keep on keeping on. So, you know, I'm in favor of this. I think it's the right thing to do on the community side of things. I think that's all.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate Megan's points, and this just you know, sort of that perspective, because I also think it's important, and I do think it's also important to think about the precedent it sets, not thinking about this specific situation, but I mean, in what she's talking about in terms of private, I mean, it is, I know a bank owns it, but this is private property, unlike Manila Dunes, right? Like, it's just because a bank owns it. I mean, it's still technically private property, unlike, again, somewhere, you know, where there are encampments, which, you know, is our property. So it's, you know, it's not like we own this, and the precedent can be dangerous just in, you know, people then coming to us in the future and just, whether it's one trailer on a prop, whether it's this or it's whatever it is, it's saying like, well, you got involved in this, and, you know, damn the specifics, because it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's the, you know, somebody can look at this and, you know, and see it, and they can look at it in any light that we want. And to Megan's point, like, I mean, I don't want to, and I haven't had time to read the article. I didn't get the board packet, you know, for a while, and, you know, I don't mind putting my, you know, my stamp of approval on it, because I agree that it is, I think, the right thing to do. But at the same time, you know, if we're pretty confident they're not going to be evicted in the next 30 days, which maybe we're not. I mean, it seems like it's unclear based on the article. Like, it does make sense to me. I mean, if you, as a member of the board, Sequoia, I mean, I know you're not out there in a board capacity, but you're doing work, you're helping, you're trying to figure out the situation. I think that outreach is great. I think if there is a way to table this to next month, I mean, I do think that's kind of in our best interest as a board in some ways. Again, thinking about the precedent, getting involved in a foreclosure, getting involved in a private property dispute. I mean, it does seem like, as much as it's symbolic, it seems like it could be somewhat dangerous of a precedent, perhaps. And I think that is an important consideration, just as an organization that collects taxpayers' money and needs to, I think, in you know, on some level, on certain matters, remain somewhat neutral. But yeah.
What specifically would we be asking staff to to do discovery on, and would delaying what would end up being probably a month and a half before an actual letter was drafted. In that time, those people may have already been evicted. At that point, we're talking about sending a letter 2 weeks before the 60-day question is even relevant. So I think kind of holding off is kind of just avoiding the situation long enough that the situation isn't one, without actually putting our intention out there, I guess.
Yeah, I think the date is somewhat arbitrary. Right now, I said that before, but to me, that's what could happen in the additional, say, to bring this back next month, should the board choose to direct staff to gather some more information, by speaking with the representative that Sequoia referred to, determine, is there an actual date out there? Perhaps working with county code enforcement to see what, if anything, if there are any open violations with the county on the RV park. Would be a couple of things that I think could be clarified that we don't have clarity on now.
Well, there are. I mean, it's definitely an illegal RV park. So there have been code violations noted for a period of time. I don't know exactly how long, but that was kind of a turn the blind eye because we're in a housing crisis, and they were not going to lead to an eviction as far as I could understand. It is strictly the fact that there was this foreclosure, and that they want to be able to sell the property. As soon as they realize, the bank realized there's actually people living there that were more, it was this whole thing they weren't aware of apparently, and so that's why they immediately backed off at the date that they were supposed to carry out this eviction. But in terms of the political precedent, to me, setting a precedent that you assure that the residents of Manila, are aware for 60 days that they need to leave they have that period of time to prepare to move, isn't something I would be concerned about in the future. I think that I would stand behind that under any circumstance. It's a complicated situation because the woman was allegedly the woman Linda was receiving her mail and receiving these notifications and not telling anybody. And so there's no way to know for a fact whether that is or isn't true, but I think it's fair to just give people the benefit of the doubt that they're not lying when they say they were unaware. And so you have quite a few people. I think the number was somewhere around 20 people or something like that are working within a week's notice to move. And so I think setting the precedent that the district doesn't support rapid eviction of residents, especially when it's not their fault that the park was illegally run. That's not their responsibility. So I personally think that it is the kind of thing that a big part of it is just giving people a clear number that are there so they can know, like, this is how long you have. And right now, nobody knows. The sheriff doesn't know. The bank doesn't know. The people there don't know. So if this makes the bank feel comfortable stating a number, and I didn't get any pushback from Joe at Cut and Realty. He wasn't, he was not feeling threatened or anything. He's like, we're still trying to figure this out. And then after we talked, he said, yeah, that sounds reasonable. So it didn't seem like it was the kind of thing that was like against their interest, because they know that they don't want this to get messy. So I think it's kind of just a nudge towards them to say, hey, this is what we think is in our interest. And if that helps you to say, yeah, give them 60 days, like the district is cool with that, so we know they'll be okay, and the people will have a number and nobody can say they didn't get their 60 days, great. And like John said, if they say, yeah, that's cool, we really don't care, it's our property, we're going to kick those people out tomorrow, then they can fully do that. And I feel personally like I could very strongly defend my position of saying, hey, I did support this idea based on the information that I've gathered, speaking to the sheriff, speaking to the real estate office, and speaking to the residents. But if people aren't comfortable with that, I fully understand. I mean, it is like a little bit outside of our scope, but we are kind of the only political body in Manila. So it's like sometimes we kind of have to get involved in politics, even though technically we're supposed to be just managing the water and the sewer. Like Chris said, the board has come out against the Iraq war, things like that. But anyways, I've spoken my piece, and I will respect whatever decision the other board members make. I don't want people to feel pressured or anything like that. I'm not going to hold it against anyone if they're not in alignment with this. I feel like my conscience is clear just giving it a shot. So whichever direction it goes is totally fine. I have a clear conscience for my values, and I want everyone else to feel that way, and I respect that.
Thank you, Sequoia. Question for Chris, and you may know the answer to this, Sequoia, as well. Previously we've had property owners come to our meeting where their property was being impacted by illegal encampments on Manila CSD, from Manila CSD property. And we've had put eviction notices out. And how many days did we provide for that?
We provided 30 days for that.
I think the only difference there is just it's the duration of and significance of residence that's established that determines there's some reason why you get 30 or 60 days. And it's, from my understanding, the 60 days is the appropriate amount based upon the circumstances of this. But I will admit I'm not an expert on that.
Our angle there, Megan, was that I think this 150 Stamps Lane issue is more of them establishing residency, and our issue was dealing with trespass encampments. So we provided the 30 days, not so much as an eviction, but more as you need to go today, really, you're evicted today, and you have 30 days to get your stuff out of here, or else we're gonna have to dispose of it, which we didn't necessarily have to do. So that's where our 30-day came from.
Another thought that occurs to me on this is, it could be as simple enough as changing the wording in the letter to ask that they notify the residents with a specific date, and suggesting that there's a 60-day window after that notification, because if nobody has a date, it seems like that's the biggest issue here, is nobody knows when. So just saying, like, as the board, we're asking the bank to provide a firm date to these people, and in a perfect world, they would give them 60 days to find new accommodations.
And is
Yeah.
that how the letter currently reads, or how would that be different than what's in there?
Well, it's just asking for a firm date, really, is what, in my mind, because that's what's missing in the whole transaction, is nobody has a firm date. So
I think, like, technically when they were, when the first eviction was supposed to take place, all the residents were aware at that time. By then they had like the notification finally. But I think like what you're suggesting, John, is just instead of saying I can't remember the exact language, but we want, a 60-day just changing the language to be a bit more of the Manila board would like to strongly recommend a 60-day, extension before evictions take place from the date of the Wednesday, the originally scheduled Wednesday, November, or whatever that was, eviction. Like just make the language more of a like, hey, this is our suggestion, not what we strongly support or anything like that. Like, if I could understand correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I just wasn't sure if there was if it read. I thought that's how it did read, to be clear, John. So that's why I was asking. Was it like different? But yeah, that was kind of my understanding what's in there. I mean, it would perhaps, what I'm hearing from the board also be beneficial to add language such as, when notice is provided to property owner, also provide to all occupants of the property, or somehow, as opposed to just saying residents, make a clear distinction between that they're, right? Because that's a part of this issue, is that all this correspondence was only going to the property owner. And then people on the ground are saying, we're not receiving it, perhaps requesting that notice be provided to the property owner and occupants at the property.
Yeah, yeah. And I just changed, so like it could say the Community Service Board of Directors would like to offer a suggestion of the granting of a 60-day extension from when the original eviction on blah blah date. And then I could say that is that this date is it is important that this date is disseminated amongst the people currently living at that address, to make sure, something along those lines. But I feel like saying, offering a suggestion of granting a 60 days, pretty neutral language. It's hard to imagine anyone getting too worked up over it.
I'll go on.
I was going to say another thing could be, just making it much more strictly like, for example, I could just leave out the last paragraph because the second to last paragraph is, there is a high likelihood that some of the current residents will end up in illegal encampments on Manila property if they're not given sufficient time. There's a fire hazard, environmental hazards, etc. The very last paragraph is, we believe it is unrealistic to find housing in the period of time that has currently been allotted, and it is unethical to evict people onto the streets without giving them a proper amount of warning, especially this time of year. I could see that being more political than maybe people are comfortable with. That paragraph wouldn't really be necessary. It's basically just saying, there's a shortage of housing. These people aren't going to be able to find houses. They might end up on our property. We suggest 60 days. End of letter.
Do you have the ability to share your screen and show us what the revised letter would look like?
Sure. Yeah. Let me see. What do I click here to share a screen? Is that under the more button, or is that under my?
If you push share screen, the green down at the bottom.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool.
And then if Chris lets you share, then you choose, and it'll ask you to choose what you want to share. So now you're looking for your Word document or other process.
I'll just. Program. Oh, okay. I see. Window. Let me just share my entire screen. I think that might be okay. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the Word document. These first two paragraphs would remain, and I'll just cut this one right now. Just
Can you put it back real quick, just so we can?
Yeah.
I believe Chris had in the chat that it was November 3rd was the original date. Is
Oh,
that
was
right,
it?
Chris?
I think it was November 2nd, the article.
November 2nd, yeah.
Yeah.
The article was written on the 3rd and it says yesterday, so.
Okay. Yeah, so this paragraph, could be, is maybe not necessary. That's what I was thinking. It's a bit presumptive that people are going to end up on the streets, although some of them will, but that's obviously not a cold hard fact.
So in terms of revising this letter, we could do what I would call a straw vote to see, okay, who's in favor of removing this paragraph? If we want to like move this along.
Yeah.
And so all those that would like to see that paragraph removed, say aye.
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 So 4-0, all of us want to see that removed so that we could make that decision without making a formal decision on this letter. Are there other revisions that board members would like to see to this letter? And I agree with, in the chat, Chris mentioned January 1st, 2023 is the 60-day extension. So a 60-day extension.
I mean, I don't know if it's necessary to state that date. If it can be deduced pretty easily from granting a 60-day extension from when the original eviction was scheduled to take place November 2nd, 2022. Like, I don't know if we necessarily need to say anything more than that personally.
Right. I wanted to just point that out. I think it buys it even a few more days because nobody's going to be rolling up on New Year's Day to
Okay.
pushing them
Okay.
around, plus the holidays and all.
Did any board members have any other changes they'd like to see to the letter?
No.
If there are none, I think you could stop sharing screens to go in.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you for pulling that up so we could take a look and see what that looks like. So I think at this point we've discussed, we've deliberated. So looking for a motion on the letter and then we'll go from there.
I motion we submit the letter as edited to Joe, the real estate agent, and then endorse it. Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. Motion carries 3-1. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for persevering through that. I'll think twice about getting political next time, but
Thank you for bringing it up to the board's attention.
yeah, you guys know who to point the finger at if they burn the whole Manila down in 59 days from now.
It will be interesting to see where that goes. Thank you. So with that, we're going to move on the agenda to the next board initiated item, which is consideration of support for additional speed hump on Peninsula Drive at Orange Avenue.
Thank you. November last year, the board submitted a letter supporting an additional speed hump on Peninsula Avenue to the Board of Soups. I've resubmitted that same letter to Mike Wilson yesterday. He wanted to see it again as this came up. Some residents on Peninsula south of the school had requested back then that we consider adding another speed hump, and it kind of died in limbo basically about that long ago. And just yesterday, Sequoia and I met with Steve Finch of County Roads, and he was very excited, surprisingly, about our ability to add at least one more, perhaps more speed humps. And it really does come down to just money. I had this item left on the agenda as a support item, and it's kind of a little bigger than Sequoia, I think, but he was driving this, and so we just put it under there because we don't necessarily have the direct authority to be getting involved in it other than supporting it as we did. So that being said, we could follow up with trying to find some funds. Steve Finch did give us some ideas as far as going to Humboldt Area Foundation, the McLean Foundation, and seeing if there's maybe some funding to backfill some of the requirements there. That's about $10,000 for a speed hump. It's going to cost the county a couple $1,000 in signage and paint. And they said they would start doing some traffic survey work as soon as this week, throwing out some of those pneumatic cables to measure speeds in the area. So I'll stop at that point with it and let Sequoia go on if there's more to add.
The only other thing I was going to say is it sounded like the Steve Finch and them thought that if we went through the school, if we worked with Brian over there at the Montessori school to apply for grants, we would have like a really good likelihood of getting these grants. The other thing that Steve said is that these speed humps, you know, they do increase traffic noise. Like if a trailer goes over them or something, it's, you know, and people speeding up. So they are not like an uncontroversial thing completely. So I think it's important to make sure that residents are on board, but we have been having at least one resident really pushing for this. They also said if we wanted to do multiple speed humps that, you know, it would be cheaper to do it that way, because they said it's like $5,000 just to get the people out there to make the speed hump. So you do a couple of them and you might save more money. The main issue is right now people speed up to the table and then they go over it and they speed out. So the research shows that if you put one a little bit before, they'll actually stay slow, at least going past the school. But yeah, seems like a good idea to me. People still go pretty fast around here, but mostly just kind of doing what our constituents have been bugging me and Chris about.
Are there currently other speed humps on Peninsula over there right now?
Yeah, the collaborative and RCAA secured funding for the $7,000 speed hump that's right in front of the school, and it has a crosswalk. So it's a little more significant than what the county would be installing next, and more of just a little speed bump, not so much a speed table as they called that.
Sure. Okay. Sounds good. But yeah, I do think I recall, I thought a resident had brought this forward to the board. Does anybody have any questions for Chris or Sequoia regarding this item? Seeing none, if there are any members of the public who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. So I meant to say I was opening the public comment. I did not see any hands raised. I will now close the public comment and bring it back to the board for deliberation or a motion. On the recommendation to recommend that we get a speed hump at that location of Peninsula Drive and Orange Avenue.
I'll make a motion to support pursuing speed hump.
Second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you for bringing that item forward, and I think then we can get a timely response to the Public Works and supervisor on that. So next we're going to go to report items. These are discussion items. And I guess A and B, receive and file the financial statement and the budget. So I guess we'll just start with 9A, receive and file the 2021 financial statement and audit. Go to Chris for a staff report on that.
I'll blow through this pretty quick here. The fiscal year 2021 audit is finished. We just got it a couple weeks ago, and for timely reference, we are now in fiscal year 2023. So 2022 is still due. This is the year before that. The overarching notion here is that this audit, if anybody on the street would happen to inquire or ask you about it, shows a net decrease in the position of the district, and that's due to a lack of grant activity. So next year and the year after that, you'll see a huge increase in net position. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. And any specific questions, normally every year with an audit, I would ask in advance that anybody had questions, they would put them in writing so that I could forward them to the auditor if I couldn't answer them. But there really isn't, unless somebody has anything to ask about that. The performance of the district isn't really looked at so much. It's more of a how much money are we stealing, and what are the opportunities of having material issues like that, and our capacity to operate public funds. So we sailed through again. This is, I think, my 14th or 15th audit, and we've always done pretty well with that. I'll just blow to the next item because they're kind of tied together, and that was the performance-based budget versus actual. We're at 33% to 41% of the year as of today, and notwithstanding my contract renewal and that increase there, we're still doing really well performance-wise. I was actually pretty surprised when I started looking deeper into the numbers because we've spent a lot of money in the last couple of months. In my other report, you'll see I talk about our van, and Ken's van needs a new ignition, and we bought a lot of pumps, and we're going to probably capitalize those. So those will show up in next year's or 2022's audit that we can capitalize and depreciate in a different way of expensing those because it's over $5,000. So we've become pretty resilient. I think the district has bought a lot of tools and fixed up a lot of stuff in the last 60 days. We had the office painted, a lot of fun things, some plumbing fixed at the lab, new water heaters. So we spent a lot of money in the beginning of the year, but we're still pretty much within budget. And there's no action required on this tonight because we'll probably be looking next year, calendar year, like January, February, perhaps at doing some budget amendments if we start running into cash flow issues like that, or at least on paper. So, but otherwise, let me pause there and ask if anybody has any questions about the budget or the audit.
Two questions. One regarding, and I might not be saying this right, the teen fund. So, and not my specialty, but there seemed to be some talk about that in the beginning of the report. Curious what that is. And then also too, like cliff notes for, really boiling it down to like, were there any recommendations or improvements that were needed or concerns by the report preparer with, is that teen challenge or, teen fund one of them, or, just maybe a little more information on that?
Sure. Yeah. In reverse order, the Cliff Notes version of this is we provide the auditor all the information that he just regurgitates into a different format. And I'm ultimately responsible for everything that's in that document. And no, he didn't find, there was no findings. We always kind of come up a little bit short in just our number of people that work there. There shouldn't really be just me dealing with all the finances or just Alicia. So we kind of split those up a little bit, but every small agency has the same types of problems. There's agencies that have one staff member and they'll have the same kind of, you don't really have enough people to keep a second set of eyes on your finances. So that's a thing we see year in and year out. The teen fund is good times. When we had that programmatic activity, the Manila Teenship Wellness Village Resource Center that had 24,000 and some change left over in fundraising money that's just been sitting in our books for a couple of years now. And the short answer about how you spend those is that they can be spent on anything, any purpose for the reasons that they were raised. And so it's kind of something that the board several years ago, and I want to remind the board, you're not bound by any prior action. You can do whatever you feel you want to do. But the board previously had allocated that money to be written a check to Humboldt Area Foundation for teen scholarships and camping and maybe school, things like that. So we haven't done that yet. It's still sitting in our account. It's not necessarily a finding from our auditor. He's just saying, you have this special revenue, this restricted fund. It's not reserves that I can spend on water valves. It's not a reserve that I could spend on speed humps, which would be great to spend it on something else, but it's allocated towards Humboldt Area Foundation. I'll close this part of it by saying that I've been trying to meet with somebody at Humboldt Area Foundation about 2 or 3 times a year that I talk about this, and it keeps getting kicked because it's not really big enough to get them excited, and it's not small enough for us to dismiss. So it's something we can readdress down the road. Selena Kalla, who ran the program, was instrumental in having a say at the time and as a board member of how those funds were going to be spent to Humboldt Area Foundation. So every time I see her, I'm like, what do you want to do with this? Let's revisit this and get this off our books, because I want to write a check. And the board can approve that or not, for $24,000 to a fund, some kind of endowment or something at Humboldt Area Foundation. And I briefly mentioned to Sequoia when we were talking about speed humps the other day that might be a good time right before we go to apply for funds for road work that we make a generous donation in that capacity.
Would it, would dealing with that fund, however it gets distributed, would that help whatever the auditors got going? I mean, is it to our benefit to do something with that?
It's less typing by the auditor. It's a single line item. A far bigger item that oddly never comes up is the interdepartmental debt that when I started, it was 300,000 and then 250,000, and we've been chewing away at it, and it's down to 100 and something thousand. It's one pocket owes another pocket money. It's not that we owe somebody else money. And that's not part of it, but he hasn't made much fuss about that because we've been sitting on it for decades or so, and he hasn't made much fuss about this. He hasn't mentioned it to me verbally that, hey, Chris, you should address this and deal with it. So
Okay.
that's really about that. But on the budget versus actual, just something to keep in mind when you deal with any public agency, a lot of the first years expenses are higher and things start to taper down because of like paying for insurance. And the audit, that was almost $9,000 right there. So there's a lot of upfront expenses at the beginning of every fiscal year that taper down and start to thin away, which gives us some time to react in another way if we needed to. But otherwise, I think we're doing pretty well, and we might look at an adjustment next calendar year if needed. That's really all I had. If you don't mind me looking at my notes real quick, I included some of the detail for the system operations at the back of the packet. We've had a lot of pump replacements.
Are there specific questions from board members? 1 on the audit or 2 on the budget versus actual? Go ahead.
Chris, it just occurred to me with this 24,000 for something for youth or something like that. Is there any way that it would be justifiable or reasonable to like spend that to like improve the basketball court and the soccer field or something like that? That was, I've just a thought. I feel like that could be sort of the only thing I can imagine that would be in alignment with sort of youth and spending.
The easiest way for me to answer that is the best way to get this off our books is to write a check to the resource center and go, here's resource center money that was raised by that exact activity that we still do. It's just run by Brian in the school now. And the worst answer is let's buy 3 speed humps with it. So somewhere in the middle, I think, lies the reasonable answer. Whether that would be appropriate to be what, was the money raised to buy basketball hoops and improve the field? I mean, it feels right. It's for youth activity. I think that if memory serves, the real reason behind moving it to Humboldt Area Foundation was to be part of a bigger pool of money for scholarships and stuff. But again, it's pretty insignificant. I can try to get a hold of them.
I was actually thinking the park basketball court and stuff like that. But
yeah. Oh, by the way, I have 2 new hoops for that, so those won't look as
okay.
much longer. But I totally with you. As far as throwing that into the park, I don't want to get too personal, but I've talked with her directly about, hey, you've got a significant chunk of dough here that's pretty big to us, and it would really augment our per capita grant. Let's throw it in the pot. And I think we'll get a lot of backlash for doing something like that. So let me look into Humboldt Area Foundation, and when I'm asking about this speed hump thing, and see if that would kill two birds with one stone and get the best mileage out of this in two ways. So.
Sure, that sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions by board members on this item? Seeing none on that, I'll open it up for public comment. If there's anyone here that would like to speak on item A or B on the agenda regarding the audit or the budget, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll close the public comments and bring it back to the board to deliberate. They are listed as discussion items. So it's my understanding you don't need do you need a motion from us to
Nope.
even file the reports or the audit or anything? Okay.
Nope, no action required.
Sounds good. Well, with that, I say no public comment. And nothing further on this item, from what I could tell. I think we can safely move on to what is, I'm just bringing my agenda back up here. Thank you, Chris, for those updates. Item C is regarding board member reports or updates. Are there any reports or other business of board members here? Seeing none, and item 9D, staff report. And so that would be general updates from you, Chris.
I kind of covered the big parts of that. The only thing I really wanted to maybe plant a flag here is how excited we are that our radio meter program was approved and it's rolling forward very quickly now. Today, we've had 2 Badger reps come up for the training part of it, and Ken jumped in the guy's car and drove around and read a bunch of meters, and it was instant. And we're very excited that that's happening. And it's coming pretty flawlessly. They were impressed that Ken was able to get his very expensive tablet with an antenna pre-programmed and ready to go. So we're really excited that that's happening. I told you about some pumps. We had a huge water main break right in front of my house again. So there's a conflict of interest that I keep fixing that thing. But that was fixed pretty quick, and we were able to isolate it. Nobody was really put off too much by that. Let's see. Oh, yes, there was a member of the public asked about the district acquiring more property. I said I would mention it to the board just to see your interest in it. We own a lot of property as it is, and they thought it'd be kind of fun to add some to our inventory in that sense. I think they had obviously some private motivations there to prevent it from being developed, but I just would put it in my report, and if that thing ever grows legs, I'll bring it back to see if the board is interested in pursuing any acquisitions. Otherwise, we're pretty loaded up with land today. And next month, being December, we can bring in our new board member. I believe Tracy Woods is defaulted into Dave's position, and we'll get her oriented, and I can find out more there, and we'll have a meeting about getting another secretary and all of that. So does anybody have any questions just about general stuff going on?
Yeah, I think we should look into the, I thought I was replacing Dave's position. Not sure it matters, but maybe we should get clear on when that starts for her. But we'll definitely have a new face on our board very soon.
Yeah, all members, the first Friday in December is usually the political switchovers. So that's
Okay.
when you're officially off the hook, Dave.
Nice, I got it. Cool. Yeah, well, that sounds good. However that plays out. Looking forward to meeting our new board member. Curious on the regional water board visit and how that went.
That was fun. We have a very friendly regulator, Roy O'Connor. He always likes us and appreciates us, oddly, and we're happy about that. due to our wastewater grant, they wanted to open up us and a whole lot of other people's WDRs, which is our wastewater discharge permit. And they were going to add some language. In short, the meeting went well. We're expecting another permit to come that's a lot thicker and heavily loaded up with some boilerplate stuff and perhaps some ground watering requirements that might be a little bit expanded, but we don't see that being too scary today. And we're going to wait to see the new permit come in the mail before we react to it. So it went okay.
Great, thank you for the update. Any other board members have questions regarding the staff report? Questions or discussion? Seeing none, I think that does bring us to the end of the agenda, if I'm not mistaken. With item number 10 is incoming communications. I'm not aware of any incoming communication.
Nope.
Just to clarify, thank you very much. And with that, I think this meeting can be adjourned and is adjourned at 8:14 p.m.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Dave. Take care.
See ya. See you soon.
Yeah.